Hey, good morning, everybody. Maury reminds us that it's Pi Day, but Maury's a little short of the number. It's actually 3.1415926, for those of you who are geometry
I love how you're rocking back and forth as you say that like Rain Man.
Yeah, well, it is, it's been one of those days. News just came in moments ago that a New Haven legend died. Nate Silverstein, longtime tax lawyer, go-to guy in Southern Connecticut, maybe in Connecticut in general, for the intricacies of the federal tax code, especially when the federal government was bearing down on you, died this morning. His son, Richard P. Silverstein, is a New Haven legend himself, 65 years or 66 years old, longtime criminal defense lawyer, currently under suspension. We've talked about him before. All the tall wheat gets trimmed in the end. And Rick is sitting out for a while, but he called to report his father's death. And I note it in passing, and I note it with sorrow, and I note it with a grim reminder to each of us that our days are numbered and the time we have to cherish the business of living is short. So carpe diem, seize the day, because tomorrow comes and the day after comes. And some day comes when it all ends. And the question for you at the end of it is, have you lived? And have you lived well enough to justify the effort? Nate Silverstein did. I've relied on him. His absence creates a void. Sure, someone else will rise to fill it, because that's the way the human spirit works. We come, we go. Civilizations, cultures form, ideals are passed along. We influence one another. But when a light ends, I think we need to note that it's ended. Note the vacuum, and then put our nose back to the wheel and grind away at being. No one gets out of here alive. The point is to live while you've got the chance. So it's hard. I didn't expect to be affected by this morning. I knew he'd been sick, and I just got off the phone with Rick moments before we began. And Rick is a raw wound, looking for love this morning. So
how old was Nate?
100. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
What a life.
Yeah. And, he fought to the end. He fought to remain alive. He wanted to remain alive. His children sorrowed as they saw him fail, and the pieces of him begin to not function. And, there was an exhaustion associated with it. How long would he suffer? The suffering has ended, as had the life. And I don't know, what a day. And into my mind then pops, what a day for a daydream. And as always, it's always a good day for a daydream. Yesterday was odd. I got interviewed by Anna Merlin she's a freelance writer, used to work for Vice, wrote a book on conspiracy theories, which I read early in my preparation for the Alex Jones case, and tried to enlist her as an expert in Jones on conspiracy theorists, because I think that what Jones represents in American culture is our fascination with a desire for answers, even the wrong answers, just so long as we have a sense of place and a sense of being in the world. And of course, she didn't want to come out on Jones's behalf because she's critical of him. I think she's a good liberal, as it were. So she called yesterday because I think it's HBO has a new documentary coming out on Alex Jones at the end of the week. It's focused largely on the Texas case, and it relates to the Sandy Hook allegations. I defended Jones, obviously, in the Connecticut allegations, but would I talk? And so we did. And among the questions she asked were several that were highly personal. One was, things haven't worked out well for Jones's lawyers in these cases. You got a suspension of your law license for 6 months. Andino Reynal in Texas had a very embarrassing misadventure with some confidential data that was, made national news and the source of national ridicule. And Jones has been publicly critical of his lawyers, including me. And I said, I hadn't heard that, but I guess it's because I don't read the news. And, how did I feel about that? And I said, the problem is that Alex Jones is a charismatic figure busy at the business of being alive and calling out a world in flux around him and marking it as best he can with the words that are available at his fingertips. And people don't always agree with what he says, and it's not required that they do so for him to speak and be a prolific speaker. I said, the problem with Jones is the same problem we have with Donald Trump. They're canaries in the coal mine, and our fascination with the canaries takes our eye off the coal mine. And the question then becomes, what's really going on in the world? It's not what Alex says. It's not what Donald Trump says. It's the energy that they reflect, in the sense the sense that they are reflecting the felt necessity of others. And ought it not be incumbent upon us to try to sculpt out the metes and bounds of those felt necessities? And of course, the answer is yes. And then she asked me about the cost of the case to me. What was there a cost? And I said, yeah, of course it was. I've had a largely successful law career. I've won trials since the Jones case and during the time it was pending in the Jones case. But the Jones case was pending. Nobody reports on a normal rape case that you win, with the jury returning verdicts on all counts after a woman testifies against a man and he remains silent. No one counts as a win a 10-year plea bargain to a case of murder after developing facts that lead the state to back off and give the man a second chance at life. No one reports on these cases unless they become gripped in the public imagination, or by the public imagination. And when they're gripped by the public imagination, if you lose, you suddenly become the hated and scorned object. And that's hard, I said, for her. I've had a largely successful career, and to be remembered in the Jones case and have that, by some people's standards, be the sum of my career is hurtful. And then I confided to her, among the casualties of the last few years has been the loss of regard by my wife, who largely took the position that the positions and cases I took were painful for her and painful for the people around her, painful for her family. And so I said, my marriage is ending, and I'm in the wind, as it were. And she said, wow, I don't think I've ever talked to you and heard you sound so incredibly dark. I'm worried about you. And I said, are you worried about me? Why? Do I sound like a bridge jumper? And she said, well, maybe. And I kind of chuckled, and I said, no, I'm alive. And I'm alive to the possibility of experience and being remade by experience, as we all are. So I got a hunch she's going to be calling back for another interview on personal topics, because suddenly, hey, Jones's lawyer, life, gets common sense, And then she said, what are you up to? And I said, I may be soon going to Texas to do some fundraising on behalf of the Proud Boys. And she's like, well, why would you do that when most lawyers scorn the Proud Boys? And I really don't know how to answer that, other than to say that I don't think the narrative reflected by the current administration as to the J6 defendants reflects the reality of the felt lives and necessity of many American people. And thus the notion of a legitimation crisis, of a crisis of a common conception of values and a common conception of right, the preoccupation of this broadcast, of this show, remains alive, well, and vital in the American psyche. You need look no further than the 2024 election and the choices we're given and the vast divisions to realize that there's something wrong here. There's something unsettled in the state, in our society, and that to learn to live together well, we must learn at some level to love one another together well. And thus the task for political philosophy, just the task for lawyers is and the task for individuals is to learn somehow to be an instrument of grace in the middle of horrible circumstances. So, check out Alex Jones's the documentary on Alex Jones this week on I think it's Netflix, if I'm not wrong.
HBO and Max. We covered this on yesterday's stream as well. So
yeah, Anna asked me if I'd watch it. I don't watch TV. I might well watch it because I'm marveling at the shape of the world as it is, and the shape of the world to come. But I don't know that I will. I've seen plenty of Alex Jones and stood next to him in harm's way in ways that almost no American can really understand, and have paid the cost of standing next to this highly charismatic man in our deeply contentious times. And I think I've bled for him, and I'm proud of the blood I shed, because for a lawyer, there is no greater compliment to say, as was said, as I think by Jesus, that, or one of the apostles maybe, greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for a client. And that is a lawyer's creed. So let's return back to politics and off the personal and talk about Donald Trump's legal woes. I mean, that's what you guys listen to this for. You don't want to hear me ruminate on life and its meaning, maybe. You come here for legal analysis of the issues and headlines of the day. And so, Trump's got a new wrinkle on his Mar-a-Lago defense case. That's the document case. And there's a motion to dismiss pending, and the court will soon decide it. Trump's lawyers have filed a motion to dismiss, saying that as a matter of law and as a matter of right, he had the option to keep any documents that he wanted to keep, including documents that he generated while president of the United States. Under the Presidential Records Act, once a president leaves office, his papers are to go immediately to the National Archives. And so the question becomes, did Trump have the ability to designate certain papers as his own papers that he'd like to keep? And therefore, is this litigation waged by Jalapeno Jack? Is this litigation well taken? I don't know what to think of the motion. I have a hunch that the judge will not grant the motion to dismiss, because on its face, the Presidential Records Act talks about the need for documents to go to the National Archives and there to be some designation of items as truly personal. And I don't think that mere possession of the document constitutes that notification. Now, we've talked before about over-classification of secrets, as it were. It strikes me that this case may represent the overclassification process, because, if as a matter of law, every paper that Trump generated becomes a part of the National Archives unless formally designated not, that requires an enormous review and oversight of the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of pages that a president generates during his 4 years in office. And if there's a presumption that all of these papers are secret unless otherwise designated not, that seems to tilt the balance in favor of secrecy at a point in which there should be a presumption in favor of openness, and certainly open records. It reminds me a little bit about our preoccupation with Julian Assange and WikiLeaks. There are things that are secrets and secrets that we need to keep. But how many secrets do we really need to keep from we the people? And when we look at the disunified political process that we have now and the great level of distrust of those in power and of elites and institutions, I can't help but wonder if it is because we have that distrust because they've had the ability to cover their tracks so well and to have so much of what they're doing remain opaque and held secret from us. So I think that
it certainly feels, especially if we draw the parallel. I know that the hearing on the Hur report occurred yesterday, and we didn't talk about that on here, and I'm not inviting us to do so now. But it's interesting that the sort of the documents case is coming back into focus, and I'm reminded that number one, the two items running in parallel in terms of the investigation of Biden's handling of classified documents, et cetera, versus Trump's is marked by one key distinction, and that is Biden was never president before as he came into possession of this mountain of information and documents, right? And so this is, as far as I can tell, truly a case of first impression, which what a coincidence that is when you're talking about a pattern of overclassification, Norm, and what we're ultimately to make of that. All that says to me as a young lawyer is that perhaps this law has never ever been strained or applied or tested. There isn't any existing protocol within that world because the establishment, as it were, just had an unspoken rule across partisan lines to say, we keep our stuff, you keep your stuff, whatever. And it isn't until an outsider like Trump comes in that they're using this as a lever another thread in that spool, right, to apply pressure to Trump. I'm really cynical, obviously, about what's going on here, but it's hard to understand what the ultimate end here is that we as a country will be able to look at and say, okay, this is the rule and this is the way that it is, and this is what we should expect as a nation, right? Of our presidents when he has his executive privilege, he can declassify things, he can mark them as personal or whatever, or What does the National Archives have any? What is their business here, and why have they become so seemingly politicized through this process? Right.
Well, yeah, and you got to wonder. I'm looking at some of the notes on our, I guess it's the YouTube feed. Dawn McNeil notes. She's lost people over the Trump phenomena. Close people. I understand that, Dawn. I understand it well. And so what is the lightning rod effect of Donald Trump, and is that lightning rod effect what's making this prosecution possible? Because you get the sense that there are people so agitated about the phenomena of Trump that they need to engage in what we now call as lawfare to seek to eliminate him. And you end up with lawsuits of questionable value, including this lawsuit.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. Well put, Norm. Of questionable value. What are we to make of this, of any of it, right?
I mean, I don't view the nation's security as having been fundamentally affected by, and this application to the Espionage Act seems to me in the service of a bloated bureaucracy that we need to know more about. And maybe we'll learn it, maybe we won't, and maybe it's sort of related to, no, it's not. I was going to say maybe it's sort of related to the algorithms of TikTok in our discussion the other day. There is the flow. There is a flow to the world, and that flow comes in the form of information, and that flow comes in the form of digital bits, and that flow comes in the form of paper. And that flow reflects how it is that people get, maintain, and use power. And if you have power, you don't want to share it because it's less power if it's shared. And so you end up with these seemingly petty disputes about insignificant events that really betoken a larger struggle for power. So let's keep track of that. I don't have a lot of hope that the court will dismiss on those grounds.
I don't expect the court to either. I think maybe the court has too much of an interest in maybe trying to answer the question that we're begging here, Norm. I try to imagine myself in the position of Trump's lawyer at the point that the federal government is putting pressure on him to make these disclosures or is inquiring about these documents. And the first question that I have is, well, how would we know how to adequately answer your question?
Mm.
Does that make sense? It's sort of, it is an initial threshold matter, this classified versus documents that are his personal, that he can take with him versus those that he has the authority to declassify. If he has this trove of information and documents and data, et cetera, in his possession, and there's some skepticism or speculation that he's fallen beyond the boundaries of what federal law prescribes on this topic, then how is it that someone in his position, even his team of lawyers, dealing with the arm of the federal government, clearly with an impetus to make this an issue? I mean, because that was that was a large part of the initiation of this, is his unwillingness to comply and his, just sort of his I guess standoffishness and discord with the federal government, that he was, and the media used that to say that he was perhaps hiding something, or that was some sort of indication of guilt on the topic. And so that's, as a practitioner, it's really difficult, because I just wonder, what is the proper, the sort of the white hat effect here for your client to always be acting in good faith, but also to not simply roll over. You've got to have a spine at some point, right? And what questions do you ultimately ask at that point, and also not look like you're acting in bad faith?
Well, I get the sense that with the Trump litigation as a whole, that he's more the Donald, that is, Trump has more or less stopped the flow of energy that was seeking to swamp him. He's had significant. He's been able to put the prosecution on its heels in every case.
Yeah, 100% agreed. Yeah, 100%.
And I give him credit for that, because whatever else the man has, he is indomitable. That is, his will is undefeatable, I should say. Because here, think of the 91 counts, the 4 suits, and yet in each case, his legal team has been able to find ways to push back, including now in Georgia, where Judge McAfee, who is still sitting on the decision about disqualification of Fannie, or is it Fannie Willis, has now dismissed, I think, how many counts? Is it 6 from the indictment? And why did he dismiss
one? So I'm reading A.R. Hoffman from The Sun. It says, while the quashing of the 6 charges, 3 of them just against Mr. Trump. So this is out of all the criminal defendants in this in the RICO case. is a separate issue from the pending matter of whether Miss Willis and her special prosecutor, Nathan Wade, will be disqualified from the case because of their romantic relationship. It presents yet another headache for the beleaguered office of the district attorney. The challenge to the charges came by way of an unusual motion called a special demurrer, which is a means of enforcing due process, as well as the Sixth Amendment's promise that the accused shall enjoy the right to be informed of the nature and the cause of the accusation against them. A special demurrer, a challenge to the indictment, is a request for greater specificity and information. The presiding judge, Judge Scott McAfee, writes that the lack of detail concerning an essential legal element is, in the undersigned's opinion, fatal because these 6 counts contain all the essential elements of the crimes but fail to allege sufficient detail regarding the nature of their commission or underlying felonies alleged. So I don't know. I'll get more into the actual charges, but this feels to me like a special demurrer is the equivalent of a civil 12b6.
Yeah, no, it is. It is. That's the common law form of the 12b6. The 12b6, on what we're referring to, folks, are the federal rules of civil procedure. And 12b6 is a rule that says a case can be dismissed, that is, thrown out of court and treated as if it were no case at all, if it fails to state a claim for which relief can be granted.
Legally inadequate, in other words. Yeah.
Yeah. So in law school, that's how we used to insult one another in the hallways after civil procedure class. What did you just say? 12b6. 12. And if somebody started, I mean, you might be surprised to learn, folks, that I acted up in law school from time to time. And I was known to sit in the back row of the case and heckle when I should have been more respectful. And if I thought one of my classmates said something that made no sense, I might mutter aloud in ways that other could hear. 12b6. And so a 12b6 failure state claim. And let's give you a homely example. Suppose I were to sue my mother for giving birth to me with a large nose, the result of which I have endured ridicule over time. I could bring that action. I could file that lawsuit. And the court would dismiss it because they'd say it fails to state a claim for which relief can be granted. The special demurrer in this case is simply a common law or a judge-made rule about that, and it's steeped in elementary notions of due process. Now, what are we talking about here? There are 2 forms of due process at work in the legal world. There is what's called substantive due process, and we've talked a lot about that with respect to the women's health decision and abortion and so forth. And then there's procedural due process. Procedural due process means notice of the proceedings against you and an opportunity to be heard. In criminal law, that's to be fair notice of the charges against you. And so you can't simply be told you stole something, or you took something without justification. You have to be told how it was. And so lawyers can file what's called a motion for a bill of particulars, asking a prosecutor to state with some specificity the manner and means by which a crime was committed. And the significance of that from a lawyer's perspective is you know what to defend against. You know what evidence to expect. You know what theory the state is pursuing. So in McAfee's ruling, he is suggesting that the allegations raised by Fannie, or is it Fannie, Willis were so vague as to mean just about anything. And because they were so vague as to mean just about anything, the defense was deprived of a meaningful right to be heard and to defend itself. The right to defend is a Sixth Amendment right. The right to notice and an opportunity to be heard is a Fifth or 14th Amendment right, depending on whether you're in state or federal government. Now, that doesn't eliminate all of the charges against Donald Trump, but it's sort of a momentum changer. And the fact that this ruling came out while McAfee is noodling what to do about the noodling that Fannie, or is it Fannie, engaged in with Nathan Wade, is good news for Trumpville. So as the campaign heats up and the candidates it looks like it's going to be, and I don't think there's any doubt, but that it's going to be Trump versus Biden. What we find ourselves in as we move into spring is not a situation where Donald's on the ropes and about ready to suffer a knockout punch, but he's suddenly sitting up and swinging back, and he's scoring some jabs that land. And I've heard even committed Democrats. I was at dinner with a group of people the other night, and a very liberal Democrat, prominent lesbian, here in Connecticut, said she fully expected Trump to win the election. And, I looked over and I said, are you serious about it? Yeah, absolutely. So, there is something happening here, and what it is ain't exactly clear.
Well, there's a couple of things I want to follow up. I want to follow up on that conversation, but put a pin in that momentarily, just to follow through with the with the Georgia stuff. So, I'm going to continue reading here just because I think that this does it better than I'm going to summarize. While Judge McAfee's dismissals do not cut to the case's bedrock, an allegation of racketeering enterprise to reverse the results of the last presidential election, they do touch on one of the indictment's most infamous episodes, the phone call between Mr. Trump and Georgia's Secretary of State, Bradley Raffensperger. The 45th president told the official that, quote, I just want to find the 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have. Ms. Willis merely writes that this colloquy constituted an effort to solicit Mr. Raffensperger to violate his oaths to Georgia's and America's constitutions. Judge McAfee, though, writes that such a reference is, quote, so generic as to compel this court to quash the charges. He explains that, quote, on its own, the United States Constitution contains hundreds of clauses, any one of which can be subject to a lifetime's study. Academics and litigators devote their entire careers to the specialization of a single amendment. This generality, Judge McAfee writes, means that Mr. Trump et al., quote, could have violated the constitutions and thus the statute in dozens, if not hundreds, of distinct ways. Such a grab bag approach, the jurist writes, does not give the defendants, quote, enough information to prepare their defenses intelligently. So I'm assuming, Norm, that this may indicate that his ruling on the ethics portion of this is going to disqualify Fanny.
Nah, I don't draw that inference. I mean,
Why not? Because it does lead me to think that perhaps the phone call was a big deal. If we could just go back in time, this whole thing, like, just find me the votes kind of thing. There was much political hay made over.
No, I get that. I'm moving on to the disqualification of Fani and the relationship.
The same way a criminal defense attorney can ask for a bill of particulars from a prosecutor, I assume that a prosecutor can refile charges with more particularity and overcome this. It's not as if this is a fatal flaw to the prosecution of these charges, but it is a temporary win for Trump. But this may, to me, nod to the fact that he is going to disqualify her, and this may give whoever is going to be put into her position, should they choose to, give them the opportunity to refile charges because of the obvious incompetence in filing them to begin with.
Well, you see a lot more in that than I do. I think that sometimes you have all the evidence you have, and that's all you have, and it means exactly what it says, no more, no less. And what it says sometimes isn't enough. I mean, I've never known exactly what it means. I just want to find 1,178 votes or 780 votes. Me too. I just want to find the winning lottery ticket. That doesn't mean I'm asking you to print it out. It doesn't mean I'm asking you to steal it. So is that an aspiration or a direction? Now, Fani wanted to take this to be a direction to Raffensperger to engage in illegal conduct and go make and create these votes. You know, Donald, I think the defense, and I think Donald would have won at trial on this with an honest jury, is, you know, this is a hope. And we all have hopes. You know, we have hopes to live forever. We have hopes to live happily ever after. We have hopes for those lottery tickets. And reality makes a mockery of those. And the courageous among us find the will to live even amid the darkest times. And so for Trump to say to Raffensperger, this is what I want, that's not enough. And so I don't think this can be salvaged. Now, having said that, I think the remark comes into evidence as reflecting Trump's state of mind and potential criminal intent. And candidly, and this word, you may be right here, Mike, but I doubt it.
Well, and you're in the majority, I think. I'm over on Rumble and really liking the discourse over there this morning. Thank you, everybody, for contributing. Lawyer Will, I'll start with you. He says Trump faces 13 counts in the Georgia case. Of the 6 counts that were dismissed, 3 applied to Trump. So Trump is still facing 10. So thank you for that precision. Hans says Fanny needs to go back to the grand jury on counts dismissed. And then I'm not sure exactly. Anyway, Jackson Barrett agrees with you. So does T-Girl. T-Girl says 0 chance. This is a bone to shut up his critics talking about Judge McAfee. When he does not.
Here's my experience. When you go to court after, you know, and the court announces a ruling, the side that first gets kissed is usually the side that last gets unkissed, or you know what. And I'm not talking about it in a loving way either. So, you know, the court concludes that the defense is right and that this charge, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And you're thinking, yeah, bing, 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 bing. But when they come out early with the bouquet, it usually means they're saving the thorn later. And the pivot then becomes, however, on balance, yada, yada, yada. And so I view this as the prelude to the thorns. I don't think that that McAfee's going to disqualify Fani Willis. I think he should. I think he should disqualify her simply on the grounds of appearance of impropriety and refer her to the bar for potentially lying, because there's no question on the evidence as a whole and the inferences to be drawn reasonably therefrom that she and Wade were heating the sheets, and that she received some financial benefit from Wade. And that in and of itself may or may not be troubling, but the fact that she lied about it under oath is devastating.
And Jackson Barrett wants to make sure that we're understanding the phone call's context. And he says, as it relates to the quote in that article, Trump was looking to find illegal votes to be subtracted, not added to. And so I think that, and then again, Bathtub Liquor is saying that Viva Frey had an interview with one of the defense lawyers yesterday, and that they went a little deeper into the call. And then Jackson follows up, says, we're not mind reading, listen to the entire call. That the context for that quote, Norm, apparently is that, I just want to find the votes. It's in reference to his desire to find where he thought the unlawful votes came from in favor of Biden, not in favor of him.
All right. Well, how many angels can dance on the head of a pin? That is a debate that medieval theologians used to have, and I don't think it's a debate that jurors should have about fundamental charges against the former president of the United States. So, folks, that's about it for the day. We've talked our way through a half an hour of your life. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to those of you who've written me private letters of support involving sort of, changes in my own life going on. I don't need anyone's pity. I don't need anyone's concern. Life is an adventure, as Oliver Wendell Holmes once said. Life is an experiment and an adventure, and every day brings with it the new possibilities. So I am grateful for the possibilities that appear in my life right now. Among them, the fact that you will hit the like button on this MF and get other people to listen. As Mike Boyer has invited me down to North Carolina to take a look at what might be a new studio for us, and the opportunity to do some more work closely together. We've been at this now 3 years this month. It's time for us to break out. It's time for you to get on your soapbox and say, these guys got something to say. I listen every day, and so should you. So if you want to do something for Mike and I, become apostles of the good word. The truth that we tell you here won't set you free. It'll just make the inevitable a little more bearable, because in the end, when we warm ourselves by the fire, we all know we're going to be toast. It's just a question of time. So on that happy note, Mike, AMF yo-yo.
I'm looking forward to AMFing in real life. You know what I mean? I'm glad to see you, Norm. We'll get some dates set, and yeah, I'm also looking forward to imagining what we are going to do in real life together. I think that's going to be special.
I'm not going to have your baby, dear.
What did you say?
I'm too old for children. I've had children. Right, well. As I like to say to friends of mine when they're having children and they're like, geez, what happens next? I say, you're about ready to be sentenced to 18 to life. And the good news, a sentence of 18 to life. The good news, folks, is that everybody learns to do the time. And then when you get to a certain age, and let me tell you, I'm of that age, and somebody says, do you want to change a diaper? Here's what you say. No, thanks. I've done my time on the diaper line.
Indeed. I think I still got a few more years in me in that chain gang.
So you're a parent when you wake up and you look under your fingernails and you see dried feces and you have no recollection of where you got them, and it had nothing to do with your wife, right?
Yikes. Anyway, you can find us here every morning, Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. Eastern, on X, on YouTube, and on Rumble. We are at Law Pod Daily, at Law and Legitimacy. You can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, wherever you find premium podcasts. And as Norm says, AMF yo-yo, and give us a like on this. Norm, we'll see you tomorrow morning. And thank you for being here. Despite you thinking that people are only here for Trump, it was made very clear in all the chats that I can monitor that they're here for you. And
I ain't nothing but a hound dog.
I actually quite like it when you go on a very vulnerable and honest bent like you did this morning. So thank you for sharing that vulnerability with us. I certainly don't take it for granted, and I don't think that anybody else does as well. Prayers to you and your family and your friends, and we'll talk to you tomorrow morning.
Ciao. You will.
Bye.